My daughter sent me a voice memo at 9:47 on a Sunday morning. Not a call, not a text. A voice memo 43 seconds long, like she had rehearsed it and wanted to get it right on the first take. I was in the backyard when it came through. I had my coffee, the good kind I grind myself from beans I order out of a small roaster in Vermont. I was watching the bird feeder I'd built last spring, a cedar thing with a copper roof, waiting to see if the pair of cardinals that had been coming around all week would show up again. My phone buzzed on the arm of the chair. I pressed play. Her voice was careful, measured. The way a person sounds when they've had the conversation with the therapist first. "Dad, I'd been doing a lot of thinking, and I talked to my husband about this. We love you, we do, but things have felt really tense lately. You have a strong personality, and sometimes it's hard for us to relax when you're around. We need to focus on our own little family right now. We think it would be better for everyone if you gave us some space. Don't take it the wrong way. We'll reach out when we're ready." 43 seconds. I sat there listening to the cardinals that never came. I played the message again. Not because I hadn't heard it clearly the first time, but because I wanted to make sure I understood exactly what had been said. They needed space. I looked at the bird feeder I'd built. I thought about the nursery furniture I'd driven 8 hours round trip to assemble when my grandson was born. I thought about the night I'd slept on their couch for a week after my son-in-law threw out his back so I could help with the baby during the night feeds. I thought about the check I'd written 3 weeks ago, $11,000, for a leak in their roof that their home warranty conveniently didn't cover. They needed space. My name is Harlan Prescott. I'm 64 years old. I spent 31 years as a maritime attorney in Charleston, South Carolina. I spent those years reading contracts the way other people read novels, looking for the lines that seemed harmless until something went wrong, because that's when the lines that seemed harmless revealed themselves to be anything but. I built a career on understanding what people really meant when they said one thing and wrote another. I was good at it. So when my daughter sent me that voice memo, I did not call her back. I did not argue. I did not send a long message explaining how her words had landed. I set down my coffee. I went inside and opened my laptop, and I started reading. The house where my daughter and my son-in-law lived wasn't technically their house. People in their neighborhood assumed it was. My daughter talked about it the way people talk about things they own: our house, our kitchen, our backyard, with the casual fluency of possession. But the title to the property sat inside a family trust I'd established in 2019. My daughter was listed as a beneficiary. Her husband was listed as a co-occupant. Neither of them was listed as an owner. I had explained this to my daughter twice, once when the trust was set up, once 2 years later when they mentioned wanting to refinance. Both times she'd nodded the way people nod when they're not really listening because they've already decided the outcome doesn't affect them. I'd been paying the mortgage for 4 years, $3,100 a month, every month, automatic transfer, never late, never missed. I paid the property taxes. I paid the homeowner's insurance. When the dishwasher broke last winter, I replaced it. When the water heater gave out in February, I handled it. When my son-in-law decided he wanted a privacy fence along the back property line, I wrote the check without being asked because I heard him mention it, and I thought that's what fathers do. I sat at my kitchen table and I opened a spreadsheet I'd kept since the beginning. I hadn't kept it because I expected to use it. I kept it the way an attorney keeps everything, out of habit, out of the understanding that the day you stop documenting is the day you need documentation most. The total for 4 years was more than I wanted to look at for very long. I closed the spreadsheet. I made another cup of coffee. I sat in the chair by the window and I thought about my daughter when she was 7, standing in the kitchen asking me to teach her how to make pancakes. I thought about her at 17, crying in the car after her first serious heartbreak, and how I'd driven around for an hour without saying anything because I could tell she just needed someone to be there. I thought about the morning of her wedding, how proud I was, how certain I was that the man she was marrying was solid. I thought about the voice memo. Don't take it the wrong way. I picked up my phone. I called my attorney. He didn't pick up on Sunday, but I left a message. I told him I needed to come in first thing Monday morning. I told him to pull the Harlan Prescott Family Trust and have it ready. I told him it was not urgent in the way emergencies are urgent, but that I'd appreciate it if he didn't wait. Then I went back outside. The cardinal still hadn't shown up. I sat with my cold coffee and watched the feeder sway a little in the morning wind, and I felt something I didn't have a word for right away. It wasn't anger. Anger would have been easier. It was something closer to clarity. The particular kind of clarity you get when you've been looking at a problem for a long time without admitting it's a problem, and then suddenly you stop pretending. I had built my daughter a very comfortable life. I had done it because I loved her, and because I could, and because I believed that was what love looked like. But somewhere in the process, something had gone wrong. The life I'd built for her had started to feel like something she deserved rather than something she'd been given. And now she was sending me voice memos about needing space. From the house I was paying for, using her free time, which was also something I was funding. I sat there until the sun came around and hit the back of my neck. Okay, I said to no one. Then I went inside and started making a list. My attorney's name is Jerome. He's been handling my affairs for 19 years. He's one of those men who speaks slowly and carries very long silences between sentences, not because he's slow, but because he's learned that most bad decisions happen when people fill silence with noise. He was sitting behind his desk on Monday morning with the trust document open in front of him when I walked in. I sat down and I put the spreadsheet printout on his desk. He looked at it for a long time without speaking. "This is everything," he said finally. "Everything I can document," I said. "There may be smaller things I didn't track." Jerome turned a page. He did the kind of reading attorneys do where their face stays very still and only their eyes move. Then he set the document down and took off his reading glasses. "What are you thinking, Harlan?" "I'm thinking I'd like to invoke the discretionary distribution clause," I said. "And I'd like to look at the language around occupancy rights." Jerome nodded slowly. "The trust gives you full discretionary authority over distributions and over the occupancy of the property," he said. "There's no sunset clause, no automatic transfer. Your daughter has a beneficial interest, but that interest is entirely subject to your discretion as trustee." "Which means," I said. "Which means she lives there because you allow it," he said, "not because she has any legal right to be there." I already knew this. I needed to hear it out loud in that office from someone other than myself. "Draft the notice," I said. Jerome looked at me over his glasses. "You're certain?" "I was certain before I came here," I said. "I came here to do it correctly." He nodded. He pulled a yellow legal pad toward him. "What terms?" 60 days, I said. "That's generous. I want the notice sent by certified mail and by process server. I want it served in person, not left at the door." "And the mortgage?" "Final payment is this month's," I said. "After that, the automatic transfer ends." "Insurance? Utilities?" "I'll cancel my policies on the property. They can establish their own. I'll give them 30 days on that one." Jerome wrote. The scratch of his pen on the paper was steady and unhurried. "And the trust itself?" he asked. "Any changes to the beneficiary structure?" I had thought about this. I'd thought about it all weekend, past midnight on Sunday. Up again before 5 on Monday. "My grandson is 2 years old," I said. "He didn't send the voice memo. Set up a separate custodial account for him. Education fund, healthcare expenses, anything that goes directly to him. I want his parents to have no access to it and no authority over the disbursements. Everything goes straight to institutions, direct pay." Jerome set down his pen. "That's not a simple structure," he said. "I didn't come here for simple," I said. He picked the pen back up. The week that followed was the quietest week I'd had in years. My daughter didn't call. I didn't call her. I assumed she believed the voice memo had worked, that I was sitting somewhere feeling appropriately chastened, waiting for permission to re-enter her life. That was the dynamic we'd built, I realized. She pushed. I accommodated. She asked. I provided. She pulled away. I reached back. Not this time. I went fishing 2 mornings that week. I drove down to the inlet and sat in my old aluminum boat with a thermos of coffee and caught nothing particularly interesting and didn't mind. I had lunch with an old colleague from the firm who I hadn't seen in 2 years because I'd always been too busy managing whatever crisis my daughter and her husband had manufactured that month. We sat on the porch of a restaurant by the water and talked for 3 hours about nothing urgent, and it was one of the better afternoons I'd had in recent memory. On Thursday, the process server went to the house on Magnolia Creek Road. My daughter's husband answered the door. From what the server noted in his report, he accepted the envelope, looked at the return address, and asked what it was. The server told him it was a legal document requiring his attention. He signed for it. The server left. My phone rang at 4:17 that afternoon. I let it ring. It rang again at 4019, then again at 4022. Then a text message came through, all caps, the kind of typing that happens when someone's hands are shaking. Then another call. I turned the ringer off. I was in the middle of a chapter of a book I'd been trying to finish for 6 months, and I was finally making progress. That evening, headlights swept across my living room wall around 9 o'clock. I heard tires on gravel, and then a car door, and then footsteps on the porch, and then knocking. Not polite knocking. The kind of knocking that is really just controlled hitting. I'd put a bookmark in my book. I walked to the door. I opened it. My daughter was standing there. Her husband was behind her. They both looked like people who had not eaten dinner and were now experiencing that particular combination of hunger and adrenaline that makes everything feel more catastrophic than it is. "Dad," my daughter said. Her voice was different than the voice memo. The careful part was gone. "Come in," I said, because I was raised to say come in. They came in. They stood in my entryway. My son-in-law was holding the envelope, and the envelope looked like it had been opened and folded and unfolded several times in the past 5 hours. "What is this?" my daughter said. "It's a notice of my intention to reclaim the property," I said. "You're evicting us," she said. "I'm exercising my rights as trustee," I said, which is a distinction you might find relevant. "Dad." She said it differently that time, softer, like she was trying to find the father she knew underneath, the person who'd apparently sent a legal document to her door. "I sent you one voice memo. One. I was trying to be honest with you. I was trying to have an adult conversation about our relationship, and you're evicting me. You're throwing out your own daughter." "You asked for space," I said. "I'm giving you space." "That is not what I meant, and you know it." "I know what you said," I said. My son-in-law stepped forward. He was trying to look calm. He was not calm. "Harlan, with respect, I think we need to pump the brakes here. This is our home. We've lived there for 4 years. We've put our lives into that house. You can't just send someone to the door with a legal notice. There are laws about this." "There are," I agreed. "I'm operating within them." Jerome Ashby drafted the notice. "If you'd like to review it with your own attorney, I'd encourage that." "We can't afford an attorney right now," my daughter said, and then looked like she immediately regretted saying it. "I know," I said quietly. The room was very still for a moment. "You know we're struggling," she said. "You know things have been hard. And instead of helping us, you're doing this." "I've been helping you for 4 years," I said, "at a rate of about $3,100 a month, not counting the appliances and the taxes and the fence and the roof." She looked at the floor. $96,000, I said, not unkindly, just as a number. "That's what the mortgage alone has cost me. That's not what I pay for the property to begin with. That's just the last 4 years of carrying costs for a house I let you live in because I wanted you to have a good life." "So this is about money," her husband said. "It was never about money," I said. "I have money. The problem is, I've been using it to build you a life you take no responsibility for. I set it all up. I maintain it all. I pay for all of it. And in return, I get a voice memo telling me that my presence is stressful and you need me to back off." "I didn't say back off," she said. "You said give us space." I looked at her. My daughter, the 7-year-old who wanted to make pancakes. "I'm giving you space. I'm giving you all the space that comes with standing on your own." My son-in-law started talking about rights, tenant protections, long-term occupancy. He used the word equitable twice. I let him finish. "I was a maritime attorney for 31 years, I said. "I didn't come to this decision quickly or without counsel. If you'd like to contest the notice, you are welcome to do so. Jerome's contact information is on the letterhead." My daughter looked at me for a long time. I can't believe you're doing this, she said. And then lower, we have a baby. I know you have a baby, I said. I drove 8 hours to build his nursery furniture. I slept on your couch for a week so you could sleep through the night. I set up a custodial account for him this morning with enough in it to cover his education through college. He'll be taken care of. That's the one thing I will not compromise on, but his care goes directly to him, not through you. She started crying. Not the dramatic kind, the kind that happens when someone is genuinely overwhelmed and the tears come before the person can decide whether to let them. Her husband put his arm around her. I noticed something in that moment. He looked at me not with anger anymore, but with something that might have been recognition. Like a man who has just understood the rules of a game he thought he'd already won. 60 days is the time frame on the notice, I said. I'd suggest using it productively. They left. I locked the door. I stood in my entryway for a moment, listening to the silence of my own house. Then I went back to my chair and opened my book. The next morning, a call came from my daughter. I answered. "Dad," she said. She sounded exhausted. "Can we talk?" "We can always talk," I said. "I don't mean about the house, I mean actually talk." "All right," I said. There was a long pause. "I didn't realize," she said. "I knew you helped us. I didn't know how much. I didn't let myself look at it. It felt like if I knew, then I had to think about what that meant, and I didn't want to think about it. And so I just didn't." I sat with that for a moment. "Your grandmother used to say that gratitude requires courage," I told her. "Because once you're truly grateful for something, you have to face the fact that you could have lost it, or that you almost didn't have it, or that someone gave it to you at a cost. And that's uncomfortable." She didn't say anything. "I understand why you sent the memo," I said. "I've been thinking about it. I probably came around too often. I probably didn't ask. I just showed up. I thought showing up was the same as being wanted. That was my mistake." "No, Dad." "I'm not done," I said gently. "My mistake was a different kind than yours. Mine was about reading the room. Yours was about looking at me like a service instead of a person. Both of those things are true, and we can talk about both of them." She cried again. This time she let me hear it. We talked for almost 2 hours. It was the longest conversation we'd had in years. Real conversation, not logistics, not requests, not performance. She told me things about her marriage I didn't know. She told me she'd been feeling overwhelmed for longer than I understood. She told me, quietly and with some difficulty, that she and her husband had been spending at a rate they both knew was unsustainable, that they'd been counting on my support to cover the gap without ever naming it out loud, and that there was a particular shame in realizing how long they'd been doing that. I listened. I did not say I know, even though I knew. "What do we do now?" she asked. "Now you find an apartment," I said. "Something in your budget. Something that costs what your income can actually support. You live there for a while. You feel what it feels like to carry your own weight. And then, when you've done that, when you built something that's actually yours, I'll be there." "In the house?" "The house goes back to the trust," I said. "I'll likely sell it. The proceeds go to your son's custodial account." A long silence. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay," I said. The 60 days did not go quietly. There were 2 more difficult conversations, one with my daughter alone and one with her husband, in which he went through the stages of indignation and then helplessness, and then something quieter that I took as the beginning of understanding. There was a call from his mother in Ohio who had opinions. There was a week where my daughter did not call, and I did not call, and we both sat in our respective silences. And then there was a Tuesday morning, about 5 weeks after the notice, when my daughter called and said they'd found an apartment. 2 bedrooms, 20 minutes from her office, more than they'd ever paid for housing out of their own pocket. She said it like she was bracing for something. "That's a good start," I said. She exhaled. "It feels scary." "Scary is usually right," I said. They moved out on a Saturday. I wasn't there. She didn't ask me to be, and I didn't offer. Some things need to happen without the person who set them in motion standing there watching. I heard from Jerome that the house was returned in good condition. I heard from my daughter that night that the move had gone fine. She sent a photo of my grandson sitting in the middle of the new living room floor, surrounded by cardboard boxes, looking around with that expression toddlers have when something is new and they haven't decided yet if they like it. He looked like his mother at 7. I sat in my chair and looked at the photo for a long time. A few days later, I drove out to the house on Magnolia Creek Road. I walked through the rooms. It was empty now, the walls showing the outlines of where pictures had hung, the floors showing the furniture marks, the evidence of 4 years of living, the kitchen counters she'd chosen, the backsplash her husband had installed on a weekend I'd funded, the window seat in the hallway that I'd built myself the summer before last, because she mentioned once she'd always wanted one. I stood at the window and looked at the backyard. Then I drove home and called the real estate agent. The house sold in 3 weeks. I put the proceeds, every dollar after costs, into my grandson's account. I wrote him a letter that I printed out and folded and put in an envelope and sealed and labeled with his name to be opened when he turns 18. I told him what the money was. I told him where it came from. I told him that the most important thing I know, after 64 years of practicing law and paying attention to people, is that there is no shortcut through the part where you find out what you're capable of. I told him I hoped he'd have the chance to find out. I sealed the envelope and put it in the file drawer with the trust documents. My daughter called on a Thursday evening about 2 months after the move. She called from the new apartment. I could hear my grandson in the background talking to himself the way toddlers do, that constant running commentary on the world. He said a new word today, she told me. What word? Bird, she said. He saw one on the windowsill, and he just said it. Bird. I thought about the cedar feeder in my backyard, the copper roof, the cardinals that had started showing up again now that the weather had cooled. That's a good first word, I said. Dad, she said, I'm sorry. I know I've said it before. I just want to keep saying it until it means something. It means something, I said. Are you okay? She asked. I'm better than I've been in a long time, I said honestly. There was a pause, comfortable this time. Can I bring him to see you this weekend? She asked. I'll have the bird feeder ready, I said. I haven't rebuilt what we had. What we had was never what I thought it was. I started building something different, something with an honest foundation, load-bearing and true, the kind that doesn't require me to maintain the illusion to keep the structure standing. My daughter is finding her feet. Her husband is working longer hours at a job he actually has to show up for. My grandson is learning words. Last Saturday they came over. My daughter sat on the back porch and drank coffee while her husband chased my grandson around the yard. I watched from my chair, the same chair where I'd listened to that voice memo 9 months ago, and I thought about how different the air felt. The cardinals came back. Both of them, the pair, landing on the cedar feeder exactly the way I'd hoped they would in March. My grandson stopped running and stood very still looking at them. Bird, he said. His mother looked at me. I looked at her. That's right, I said, bird. There's a cedar bird feeder in my backyard that I built last spring. It's not complicated, just good wood, a copper roof, and enough patience to let the birds decide when they're ready to come. I thought about that feeder a lot in the months after everything happened. How you can't force a cardinal to land, how the moment you stop needing it to, it usually does. I didn't set out to teach my daughter anything. I want to be honest about that. When I called Jerome that Monday morning, I wasn't thinking about lessons or growth or what the experience would build in her. I was thinking about myself, about a man who had spent 4 years carrying a structure that was starting to crack, and who had finally looked at the crack long enough to admit what it was. That's not wisdom. That's just honesty arriving late. But I've been thinking about what actually happened, the cause of it, the shape of it. My daughter and her husband were not bad people. That matters. They weren't cruel by nature. They were people who had been handed comfort so consistently that they'd lost the ability to imagine earning it. Every time I wrote a check without being asked, every time I showed up with a solution, before they'd had a chance to sit with the problem, I was telling them, without words, that I didn't believe they could handle it themselves. That's a quiet kind of damage. It doesn't look like damage. It looks like love. What they needed, and what I finally gave them, too late and harder than it had to be, was the chance to find out what they were actually made of. My son-in-law loading boxes into an apartment they'd budgeted for themselves. My daughter on the phone with a landlord, negotiating, figuring it out. Those aren't small things. Those are the moments that build the kind of character that doesn't collapse when something goes wrong. The kind that holds. I've been robbing them of those moments for years because I couldn't stand to watch them struggle. There's something I've come to believe, not from a book or from anything anyone told me, but from 64 years of watching people. The clearest sign of real integrity isn't what someone does when things are easy. It's what they do in the 48 hours after the ground shifts. My daughter called me the morning after I served the notice. Not to argue. To talk. That took something. That took more than I expected from her, and I've been carrying that quietly ever since. And Harlan, what did it take from you? That's the question I sat with in those long evenings after the house sold. It took admitting that generosity without boundaries isn't generosity at all. It took being willing to be the villain in someone's story for long enough that they could write a better ending. It took every ounce of resolve I had to listen to my daughter cry and not reach for the checkbook. Because the checkbook was the thing that had gotten us here. The Cardinals came back. That's the part I keep returning to. Not because it's poetic, though I suppose it is, but because it's true that the things worth having tend to return when you stop trying to control whether they do. My daughter brings my grandson over on Saturday mornings now. She makes coffee in my kitchen and we talk, really talk, the way we used to when she was young and hadn't yet learned to manage me instead of know me. It's not the relationship we had before. It's better. It's real. I built things for 31 years. Contracts, arguments, cases. I thought I knew what a solid structure looked like. Turns out the most important one I ever built was the one I had to partially tear down first.